Hello, I am Jonathan Levy, the City of Chicago's Open Data Program Manager, meaning that my main job responsibility is running the city's Open Data Portal. And the purpose of today's video is to give you a brief introduction to how to use our portal and what we have. And I should mention that although, of course, I'll be focusing on the City of Chicago's data portal, much of what I talk about would be applicable to other data portals that other government entities in the US and around the world have, and particularly those that, like us, use the Socrata software, Socrata being one of the major data portal providers. So why does the City of Chicago have a data portal? The first reason, of course, is simply just transparency. It's government data. We live in a democracy. People have a right to see what their government is doing. But beyond that, it's for economic development. There have been a number of companies that have either built products off of our data or simply just used it to inform their business decisions as they do business, particularly even start to do business in the City of Chicago. It's for community use. There have been any number of community organizations around the city that have used our data to organize, to create projects in their communities, to do any number of things. Many other reasons. The City of Chicago employees themselves are a major user of the data portal. As we often say, in many cases, the best way for a city employee to get access to some data from another department is often to go to the data portal. And even internally, I work in the city's information systems department. We use it quite a bit for some of our projects to try to better organize, better optimize city operations in a number of areas. And in many cases, if possible, we try to use data directly off the portal just as would be available to the public. So with that, let's launch into how to use the portal. And one thing I should mention is that although one can sign up for an account, and I will show in one point where to do that, almost everything I do here is going to be done anonymously, not signed in, which means with no special permissions that I have as a city employee or as the Open Data Program Manager. There'll be things you could replicate yourself just as anybody out on the internet just using our data portal. So this is the City of Chicago data portal. The most important piece of information, of course, is where to find us. data.cityofchicago.org. So you'll see when you come to our homepage, we've got across the top at any given time 4 different data sets that we're highlighting for one reason or another, usually something new, interesting. These will rotate over the course of time. The main part is down here, where you've got the dataset catalog. Here you will have a list of our various datasets, or I should say not datasets, as it says here, datasets and views. And I'll get to that in a moment, but it's important to know that there's actually a distinction. You can sort them various ways. So right now, we've got what was most accessed this week. You can do alphabetical if you wish. You can see what is newest, or if not newest, most recently updated. Newest being something that's brand new. Recently updated would be how recently we added new data. And we try to put an emphasis on keeping our data fresh. So most of our data sets, or at least most of the most active ones, update overnight on a daily basis. Some will update more often than that. We've got a few, such as traffic conditions, and over the summer, readings at the environmental readings at the city's beaches that update every hour or even every 15 minutes. And then, of course, some things that don't change as quickly and don't update as often. Over here, you will see, as I mentioned, view types. One important thing to know on our data portal is that everything is a view. Some things are data in their own right, and those would be the things that would be under datasets, maps to some degree, and I will get to that later, and files and documents. Those are things that are actually data. We've got everything else is a view on the data. It is a way of charting data, but not in its own right data. It would always be relying on an existing data set, or a filtered view, or things of that nature. And we'll get to that in a little while. So, how would one find something on here? As you'll see, there are 3 basic sections here. First, let's limit ourselves just to data sets. And by data sets, what that means is rows and columns, things that will look very much like an Excel spreadsheet. And as a matter of fact, can be exported to Excel, although I should note that in some cases, our data sets have more rows than Excel can support, so you wouldn't be able to open them in Excel. Then the simplest thing is just to search for something. So in the city of Chicago, we have something that a lot of cities have called 311, where you'd call 911 for emergencies, you call 311 for things that aren't emergencies, such as maybe you've spotted a pothole, or you need a new garbage cart, or I think there are literally about 500 of these different things. So you see that a number of them are already up on the screen, but let's suppose they weren't. We search for 311, hit enter. And now here are things that have 311. Now, although you're not seeing it here, one important thing to know is this will search everything, both the name of a data set, the description of a data set, and even the data within a data set. So sometimes you'll do a search and you'll find a data set, you may not understand why it's appearing here. It's simply because the term you talked about, and actually now that we give it a little more time, it shows up here, that term just actually happens to appear in the data. And of course, you can sort these just as you can sort the whole catalog. Let's suppose, though, we want to zero in a little bit further. Like many government entities around the United States, and I assume around the world, although I'm not as familiar with the laws, we have a Freedom of Information Act in Chicago, or in Illinois, but covering Chicago. And one of the things we post is what requests have people made under the Freedom of Information Act. So if I go down here to categories, which are broad, as you might imagine, broad categories of data sets, you'll see here, okay, now we're zeroing in a little bit more. Now we're looking not just at 311, but the FOIA request log for that department. The third major way of finding views or data sets is to use topics, which are basically just keywords, as you'll find on many websites. Now, my current search is actually so limited that if we tried to do a keyword, we wouldn't get anything. So if you just want to start your search over, go to Clear All Options, and we're back to the home page. Down here under Topics, if you click View All, you get a word cloud, which shows you not just the topics, but also how often they've been used. So let's say, for example, we wanted to find everything involving events, a keyword that we use. You get this. So as you can see, it's a bunch of farmers markets and various other things that we've put up that are going on around the city. One important thing to know is that we will assign exactly one category to any given data set. But for topics, we can assign anywhere from 0, although we try to apply some, to as many as apply. So it's a little bit different way of categorizing the data sets. Final thing I'm going to show in this section is I mentioned that everything I'm doing here is anonymously, not signed in. There will be certain limited purposes for which you actually will want to create an account, and I'll get to that later. If you were to want to create an account on the data portal, you go to the sign up link, simply put in an email address, your name, create a password, and like many sites, there's a CAPTCHA. Hit create my account, and you have an account that you can use. And a little later in this presentation, I'll explain one of the reasons, probably the main reason, why you might want to have an account. Most of the data on our portal is, as I mentioned, tabular data sets. So let's work through an example of how one might use a tabular data set. Going back to our home page here, one of the data sets that gets a lot of attention is food inspections. It's got every inspection in the city of Chicago back to, honestly, I forget myself, January 1st, 2010. So at this point, we're a little bit over 5 years of collecting data. As you see, tabular data sets, rows and columns. You can go to this About here, and you get some information. When it was most recently updated, when it was created, a description, how many rows there are. Here's the category we put it in. Here's the tags that we've applied. Just some basic information about that data set. So we have this, as with many of our data sets, sorted by default by the inspection date, most recent to oldest. Let's suppose you wanted to look at it the other way. For something that's already sorted, you can simply click on this arrow and reverse it. But let's suppose you wanted to sort a different way, perhaps by the results. One simple way is you can click on this little icon here, and say sort ascending. Or, of course, sort descending. And you can do this on any column. So let's take an actual working example here. We are recording this video in Chicago's City Hall. And afterwards, I probably want to go out and get lunch. So we can go to this filter tab here, and you can filter by any column. So City Hall happens to be in the zip code 60602. So let's go down to zip, and there's actually a number of things you can do here. You can do between, you can greater than, less than, because this is a numeric column. But one of the simplest things is just simply is. What zip code do we want? 60602. And we're now filtered down to just those inspections. And one thing I didn't show before, we will often, on one of the leftmost columns, put a total at the bottom. I didn't show it before, but there were about 119,000 records in total, but now we're down to about 826. That's not bad. That gives me a smaller number of restaurants than I might want to look at. But let's suppose I want to see just those that have maybe been inspected in the last 6 months or so. Because, older than that, maybe I'm not interested in the inspection results. So inspection date is after, and you can either scroll through here and pick a date, or you can simply just type a date. So let's say the 4th of July. And by the way, to make any of these filters work, all you simply have to do is just click somewhere outside of the box, and that activates it. So now we're down to 71. Okay, that seems like a more manageable number as I try to figure out where to have lunch. By the way, one thing you can do is, while I'm showing you things you can do in the data portal here, on all these data sets, there's an export button. If you simply just wanted to say, okay, I've gotten this far enough, I just want to take my data and put it out in a comma-separated value, in Excel, and various other formats, you can do that, and you will download either the whole data set if you haven't done any filters, or at this point, if I were to do it, I would get just my 71 records. Okay, let's suppose now, okay, so this is nice. I've got 71 restaurants, but where are they if I actually want to find somewhere to go? Well, let's go to Visualize here. Let's say we want to create a map, and you simply have to tell it what kind. In most cases, you're going to want a point map, where it just puts a dot on the map for everything. And you need to tell it where to find the location. Helpfully, though, it tells you which ones would work. As it happens here, as with many of our data sets for a map, there is only one that tells you the location, and it's simply called location. Pick that. Go down here to the bottom and hit apply. And now we're looking at the area around City Hall, right here, and where the restaurants are. Now it shows some of the records here. Simply just to create some more space on the screen, I'm going to close this section here. Now you can click on these and find out a little bit more, except really at this point all it would give you is a link to go to the details here. But you can create what is known as a flyout. So we go down here to advanced configurations, or advanced configuration of food inspections. You could, if you wanted to, you could change the colors that these appear in. Just for kicks, let's do that. And again here, you're going to want to hit apply so that you see your changes. But what I was really getting at here is what they call the flyout, which can be useful. So you can now look at your various columns and say, when somebody clicks on one of these dots, what would you like to see? Probably the most obvious thing is DBA name, doing business as name. That's fundamentally just what name are you going to see on the outside of the business if you go to that business, as opposed to maybe some corporation that it was licensed under or something of that nature. And then we can provide some details here. So let's suppose we want to see the address. Let's suppose when the inspection was done, and what was the result. Again, we hit apply. Nothing visually has changed yet, but now if we click on something, okay, now I know that's not just a dot on the map. Now I'm looking at Chipotle that was inspected on December 18th, and they passed. So maybe I'll go to lunch there. Let's suppose, though, that, just to show another feature here, let's suppose I rode my bike today. So it's important to me to know where can I find a bike rack near the restaurant. On any map here, you can go to Add Data and find another map. So let's search here for bike racks. And let's add that to our map. Just as with food inspections, we have to actually tell it how do we want this displayed on the map. So we've got a point map, and again, location. Apply it. And now, that's actually one nice thing about the fact that I changed the color on the food inspection, so we can now tell the difference. Now we've got our bike racks in blue, and I could find, if I happen to need to find a restaurant that was near a bike rack, I could do that. Just a simple example. You can obviously mash up any two maps, or even more than that you might have. Okay, let's revert all this to show something different here. Let's suppose you're not so interested in finding a restaurant to go to, but you'd like to get a better sense of what's the general pattern of food inspections in Chicago. So from the data set, we can go here again to filter, but this time we're not going to use filter, we're going to use sort and roll up. And by the way, this is also an alternate way of sorting, but it's pretty self-evident, so I'm sure you can figure it out on your own. What I want to focus on here is roll-ups and drill-downs. So let's suppose we want to know how many inspections have there been by year in Chicago. So we'd simply say we want to group by the inspection date, and for a date column, it helpfully asks, well, do you want to group them by day, by month, or by year? Let's do it by year. And then you need to, we grouped it, but you need some sort of a statistic. On here, there's really only, all you can do is count. On some data sets, you would be able to do sums, averages, things like that. And the trick here is you just need to pick some column that's not going to be blank, which inspection ID works really nicely. Say count. And we go down here. And there's how many inspections we've done by year. You can see that it's very early 2016 now, so we don't have a lot of inspections yet this year. Actually, to show sort, so this came up descending. Let's suppose we want to do it ascending. Simply just change that. And now we're sorting in the other order. Now, one thing you might want to do with this is not just see the numbers, but maybe chart them. So we go to Visualize, and there's a lot of power to this charting, most of which I'm not going to show today. One useful thing to see, though, is you'll see certain things are grayed out. Helpfully, the software will not show you a chart type that doesn't apply to the data you're looking at right now. So let's say we want to do a column chart. We go down here. So our data level is inspection date, and our value is, now you may notice here, what's actually the count ends up called inspection ID. It will end up called whatever column you picked to count by. It's a little just sort of an eccentricity of the software. And there we go. Again, here I'm going to close this just for a little bit of space. And now you can see by year how many we did. Sort of. One thing I will add here, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because we could spend probably an entire presentation just on charting itself. I believe under labels and values. There we go. Go into labels and values. Let's suppose we actually wanted to see the number. Value in bar. Now it's not just charted, but you actually can even see your value. And as I say, there are quite a few more things you can do. Finally here, you may recall that I said that there are a few purposes for which you might want to create an account. This is one of them. Having created something, a filtered view, a chart, something like that that you want to be able to come back to later, you can go to Save As, give it a name. So let's say food inspections by year. Now, if I were already signed in, and you can see here, one would just click on the sign in here, it wouldn't even prompt me. Since I'm not yet signed in, it's going to prompt me and say, you must be logged in to save a view. That makes sense. If it doesn't know who you are, how does it know whose account to save it under? You would simply put in your email address and password, sign in, and it would save this for you. And then you would be able to come back to this later. So that's the end of our view of tabular data sets. Now let's take a look at some other types of data sets. So the other major type of data that we have on the portal is maps. So you see, we click over here to maps. One thing to know, though, is as I showed you how to create maps off of tabular data sets, we have actually created quite a few of those that we make public. So what you're seeing here is actually a mix of those things and things that are truly geographic data in their own right. The way to see the distinction is if you go down to topics, for those that are geographic data in their own right, we apply this tag of map layer. So now that's what we're looking at. So let's suppose, I don't know, Chicago's census box. Simply click on that. And of course, census box being quite small, this is quite dense, but we can zoom in a bit. And now you can start to make them out. It's every census block in the city of Chicago. If you were to click on one, it will show you various information about that particular record. And also useful, and even more than tabular data sets, you often may want to do this, is maybe you just want a copy of this to put into your own geographic software or for various other purposes. Simply go to export, and you see you can download it in any of several very common geographic formats. You also can, if you want just the data but not the geographic part, you can download that as well. So that is a quick intro. I would encourage you to look through this. We've tried to put up quite a bit of geographic data. The city is actually very active in trying to maintain geographic data and to make it public. So hopefully you will find that of interest. And I had one final thing I wanted to show. And that is something relatively new called data lenses, which are another way, again, they're not data in their own right. They're a way of looking at data. And you'll see those as a view type. So let's go back to our food inspections here. And you'll see it's got a slightly different icon because we're looking not at the data set, but at the data lens. What you get is a nice automatically created set of charts where you can look at the nature of your data. So we were talking about inspection date before. But here you can see all the peaks and valleys by month. You can see by risk level, and risk level is not any, doesn't mean anything good or bad about that restaurant. It's simply, in essence, how inherently risky is that nature of that business. A restaurant is more dangerous than somebody that's just selling packaged potato chips, for example. And I shouldn't even say dangerous as much as just needs to be inspected more often. You can see here the results. Nice to see that most of our establishments pass. You can see the zip codes. You can see various maps, and some of these may get a little bit small, but you can pop these out, zoom in, and now you can see the distribution of food inspections across the city by zip code. And one nice thing about these data lens pages is that they've got what's called cross-filtering. So let's suppose I was only interested in those inspections that resulted in a pass. I can click on that, and not only does it filter that, but now you see every other chart here shows you both how many were there in total, how many were there that passed. And you can do that for that, or let's suppose, as another example, you wanted just the ones that happen to be in the 60647 zip code. Again, it will filter them down. So this data lens pages are a relatively new thing. You'll find that we don't have a lot of them yet, but we've been trying to roll out more and more, especially as we create new data sets. So that is the quick introduction to the City of Chicago's data portal. I really encourage you to learn by doing. Try it, play around, ask questions. If you are in Chicago, there's quite an active open data community that I would encourage you to get involved with. They're very friendly people who will answer questions, who emphasize you do not necessarily need to come in with a lot of technical knowledge, although they will be thrilled if you do have technical knowledge. Get involved. Try it out. You'll see here that we've got, depending on how you measure, something between about 500 and 600 different data sets. We've touched on a couple here. You can see some of the most popular ones. I think the best thing is to learn by doing. Give it a try and definitely shoot us some questions if you have any. In that vein, you'll see across the screen here a couple ways to get in touch with us. Our email address is dataportal@cityofchicago.org, and we're also quite active on Twitter under a number of accounts, but the main one being Chicago CDO, which is the account managed by our Chief Data Officer. Definitely feel free to reach out to us. We're always interested in knowing what people are using, what they like, what they don't like, what improvements they'd like to see, questions, whatever it may be. And finally, you'll see on the screen a few URLs to some websites. The Tumblr blog there is a blog that we maintain to let people know what we're about to change, particularly if people have built applications off of our data. We don't want them to be caught by surprise and have something break because we changed something. Occasionally, if we're changing something else, honestly, if something is down, like any system, sometimes things will be down, and we want to be transparent about that and let people know, or just other things that may be of interest to the community. And the other links are to some pages that Socrata, our data portal vendor, maintains to provide some videos, some articles, some FAQs, things to help people use their product, which of course would include the City of Chicago data portal. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you for joining us today.